And welcome to Camping in Nature, Chapter 2, part of John's Eclectic Photo Time Adventure Series. This is Episode 24. The whisper of the wind through the trees was gentle but persistent as John stirred within his tent, his body still aching slightly from the long night of photography. Chapter 1 of this journey had ended with star trails dancing across the heavens, their arcs frozen in time by the lens of John's Canon R5 Mark II. The Milky Way, stretching like a great river across the Texas night sky, had yielded its secrets to John's careful framing and bracketing. The camera had performed flawlessly. Nature had given its blessing. As soft light bled through the fabric of his tent, John unzipped the flap and stepped into the brisk dawn of Colorado State Park. The cool air bit into his cheeks, and there, perched casually on the tent's guy line, as if to greet him, was a Katydid, a perfect, vibrant green, its delicate legs barely moving, its exoskeleton shimmering under the rising sun. John chuckled softly. "What a way to wake up," he whispered, already reaching into his camera bag for the macro lens. Click, click. A few careful frames later, the Katydid leapt away, vanishing into the nearby brush, as if it had fulfilled its role in some grand play of nature. Breakfast was simple: instant oats and coffee, cooked over the faintly glowing embers from last night's campfire. John savored each bite slowly, already visualizing the hike ahead. 8 miles to Gorman Falls, a legendary spring-fed waterfall cascading down limestone cliffs, veiled by a canopy of green. He'd seen photos online, but he knew that nothing compared to capturing its essence firsthand. And here is some of the information out here at Colorado Bend State Park. Let me flip the screen. This over here is the primary camping area, and from the camping area all the way over to the Gorman waterfalls is about 8 miles. The falls, and they do not look like this. At least when I was here, there was just water trickling down. We'll see what happens this time. Camera bag secured, water bottles filled, and boots double laced. John's first destination was less poetic. The outhouse by the trailhead. Nature called in more ways than one. And then the real journey began. The trail began deceptively level, following an abandoned service road. It was here that John paused, captivated by a small patch of purple wildflowers, their petals trembling in the breeze. The moment was delicate, intimate. He knelt slowly, framing the flowers with the bright morning sun behind them, a few fluffy clouds drifting like lost sheep. Click. John took a moment to just breathe. The forest was still, save for the occasional rustle of a jay or the sudden chatter of a squirrel overhead. The air smelled of cedar, dew, and distant limestone. As the hike continued, so did the purpley blooms. They became like old friends, cheering him onward. Every few bends in the trail, another patch waited to be admired, to be photographed. Each time, John obliged. The trail began to descend steeply. Rockety switchbacks curved into the hillside, forced John to slow his pace, carefully placing each step. The further he went, the denser the foliage became. Trees leaned in close, like an audience eager to witness his journey. Somewhere below, the sound of rushing water began to rise, the thunder of the falls calling to him. Through a dense wall of tangled oak and junipers, he saw it. A flash of white mist, a glint of sunlight water arcing over stone. Gorman Falls. John reached a clearing and collapsed onto the sun-warmed boulder, the sweat drying on his brow, his camera pack thudding to the ground beside him. His boots came off, quickly followed by damp socks, which he spread out on a rock to dry. From his side pouch, John retrieved 2 bags of almonds and dried cranberries, Miya's thoughtful addition. As he chewed slowly, he took in the falls, not through a lens, but with his eyes and heart. The sound was immense yet calming. The water fell in layered ribbons, splitting over mossy ridges, disappearing into a shallow turquoise pool at the base. Before grabbing the camera again, John snapped a selfie with his phone, his sun-drenched, flushed face grinning at the scene behind him. "For Miya," he whispered. Then the real work began. Circling the waterfall, John scouted carefully. Light beams filtered through the overhead canopy, creating pockets of intense contrast. He set up low to the ground, balancing exposure using bracketing, capturing the bright, sunlit mist at the top and the shadowy, mossy rocks below. The dynamic range was tough, but his camera could handle it. Shifting to the shadows on the right, John adjusted again. He lined up a 5-frame series, using focus stacking to ensure the gnarled tree roots in the foreground and the falls in the distance were tack sharp. With each shutter press, he felt closer to capturing the soul of the place. Finally, he switched to his ultra-wide 10 to 20 millimeter lens. It changed everything. The entire canyon opened before him. Water, rock, leaf, the light all pulled together into a harmonious composition. He moved slowly, patiently, waiting for the right breeze to be still, the right shadows to shift. For 3 full hours, John lost himself at the falls. The scene evolved with the moving sun, and John adopted with it, sometimes taking long exposures to soften the water's flow, sometimes freezing droplets in time. The final frames were layered, complex, and alive. But the sun climbed higher, and the hike back awaited. Boots back on, socks only halfway dry, John hoisted his gear and began the ascent back to camp. The purple flowers greeted him once more, now bathed in afternoon gold. He did not stop this time. He did not need to. The photos were already safe inside his camera, and the memories burned deeper. By mid-afternoon, John arrived back at his wilderness tent. He slid inside, removed his boots again, and collapsed on his sleeping mat with a long sigh. The forest sang outside, crickets, breeze, and birds in concert. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. Soon the sunset would arrive, the stars would return, and John would be ready his gear once again. But for now, he simply listened. To be continued in Chapter 3 of Camping in Nature. Sunset gold, star trails reborn, and the Milky Way returns for a grand finale. And we hope you enjoyed this episode, Chapter 2 of Camping in Nature. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. Join us next time for Chapter 3 of Camping in Nature.